Have you ever wondered how a central bank actually measures all the money flowing through an entire country's economy? It sounds like an impossible task, right? Well, you're in the right place. Today, we're building a dashboard. In this explainer, specifically the Reserve Bank of India's money supply dashboard. We're going to take complex financial mechanics and break them down visually. We'll be constructing the 4 structural metrics the RBI uses for tracking money: M1, M2, M3, and M4. And we're going to build them block by block, layer by layer, right here.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our structural dashboard menu for today. First, defining money supply. Second, M1, the base layer. Third, M2, the post office layer. Fourth, M3, broader economic layer. And fifth, M4, ultimate wide layer.
So, starting right off with section 1, defining money supply.
Before we start snapping our modular formula blocks together, we gotta establish exactly what we're talking about. Money supply is defined as the stock of money held by the public at a point of time as a means of payments and store of value. Now, there are 2 incredibly vital things to notice here. First, it's a stock concept. This basically means it's measured at one very specific snapshot in time. Think of it like hitting the pause button on the entire economy just to count every single rupee in circulation on that specific date. Second, notice the word public. This means private individuals, businesses, institutions, but it strictly excludes the actual producers of the money. So the cash sitting in the government's treasury or locked up tight in the central bank's own vaults, that doesn't count. We're only measuring what's actively out there in the public domain. Moving right along to section 2, M1, the base layer.
All right, with our foundational concept locked in, let's build the absolute narrowest, most liquid foundational block of our financial dashboard, M1. To construct M1, we need 3 distinct components. First up, C, which stands for currency notes and coins held by the public. This is literally the fiat money you carry around in your pocket, legal tender, perfectly backed by the government. Second, we snap on DD, which is demand deposits with commercial banks. These are the funds you can access instantly, like by writing a check. Now, sure, demand deposits aren't technically legal tender since a shopkeeper can technically refuse a check, but they're incredibly convenient and practically as liquid as physical cash. And finally, we include OD, representing other deposits with the RBI. And this brilliantly illustrates how these 3 components modularly fuse together to create the RBI's primary base measure, M1. So, M1 equals C plus DD plus OD. This is what we call the narrow definition of money supply. It strictly emphasizes the medium of exchange function of money. Literally everything inside this M1 block is highly liquid, meaning you can immediately use it to buy groceries, pay for a haircut, and just settle debts right this second.
Which brings us to section 3, M2, the post office layer. Now, the economy is way bigger than just the cash in our wallets and the demand deposits in our checking accounts, right? But to get M2, we don't start from scratch. We simply take that entire M1 base layer we just built and plug it directly into our new formula. Then we add DSD, standing for savings deposits with post office savings banks. You see, in a country like India, the post office network is so unbelievably huge that it operates almost like a massive shadow banking system for millions of people, especially in rural areas. By taking our highly liquid M1 block and snapping on those post office savings deposits, the dashboard gives the RBI a slightly wider, much more inclusive view of the public's accessible funds.
Let's keep going. Section 4, M3, broader economic layer. Let's zoom out a bit further and transition to our third metric. We're widening our scope now to include less liquid assets stored in commercial banks, shifting our focus from just pure quick exchange to a massive store of value. Notice how M3 actually resets back to our foundational M1 base layer, but this time it substitutes the post office savings for TD, time deposits with commercial banks. Famous economists like Milton Friedman always argued that money isn't just about quick transactions, it's crucially a store of value too. Time deposits, like fixed deposits, represent a massive chunk of this stored societal wealth. Obviously, they aren't as instantly liquid as the cash in M1. I mean, you can't just write a check at the grocery store against your fixed deposit, but they are reasonably liquid and hold a huge amount of the public's wealth. So by adding time deposits to M1, M3 becomes the wider definition of money supply, and it's heavily monitored for macroeconomic planning.
And finally, section 5, M4, ultimate wide layer.
We've reached the very edge of our dashboard. Let's introduce the 4th and final layer of the RBI's structural metrics. To construct this ultimate wide metric, M4, We take that already broad M3 layer, which, remember, has all the currency, demand deposits, other RBI deposits, and commercial bank time deposits, and we snap on TDP, which stands for Total Deposits with the Post Office Savings Organization. This brings absolutely all the long-term and short-term post office deposits right into the fold. It creates the absolute widest possible lens through which the central bank can view the stock of money. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is a crucial warning tag we get straight from the source material. When the RBI calculates M4 and adds up all those total post office deposits, the formula strictly dictates excluding national savings certificates. Why on earth would they do that? Well, because these specific certificates have strict lock-in periods. They are not easily transferable, so they act much more like locked-up government debt than actual circulating public money. Stripping them out of this particular calculation is just a phenomenal example of the meticulous precision that central banking requires. So the crucial point here is really just stepping back and looking at this distinct contrast across our completely built dashboard. On one far end of the spectrum, we have our M1 base, the narrowest measure. It's highly liquid, immediately available, and perfectly serves as a rapid medium of exchange. On the absolute opposite end, we have the M4 structure, the widest measure. M4 totally encapsulates M1, but it layers on these massive, less liquid blocks of time deposits and post office savings, which serve primarily as a broader store of value for the public. It really is a brilliant, modular way to categorize a nation's wealth based entirely on liquidity. Which brings us to the ultimate question. We know from our source material that demand pull inflation happens when an increase in the supply of money stimulates demand way faster than the economy's production capacity can handle it. The root cause is quite literally too much money chasing too few goods. So, if tracking the money supply is the absolute key to predicting and managing inflation, how does a central bank look at these four distinct layers, say sudden spikes in the highly liquid M1 versus maybe slow growth in the broader M3 and M4 to diagnose the true health of the economy? Think about how the speed and liquidity of that money might tell two entirely different stories about where everyday prices are heading next. It's an absolutely fascinating macroeconomic puzzle to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep thinking structurally.